Welcome back to Test, Learn, Grow with Level Agency. Today on the podcast, we have Vox Plan with Julia, project manager, and Dave, co-founder and executive. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you both on today.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Good to be here.
I'll start with you, Dave. Could you just give us your a little bit about yourself and the company?
Sure. So as one of the founding members, we recognized some time ago, back in 2016, actually, that there were a lot of, I'm going to call them owner organizations, but a lot of capital project organizations that weren't really mature or that needed assistance or mentoring to help their staff get up to speed. And that's kind of how we founded Vox and started moving forward. So we typically integrate ourselves into an organization to do just that, to help raise the bar, help them set some standards, mentor their teams, and at times become extensions of their staff, depending on how that fits. Personally, I've been in construction management since my school days back in the late 70s. So a few decades. Construction management, from everything from project organization to planning to schedules to cost. That's really the neighborhood that we work in.
And Julia, how do you fit into this neighborhood that Dave describes?
That's a loaded question. I'm kind of the Julia of all trades. So I fit in on different levels. So it could be setting up project sites. It could be working with brand new clients and figuring out what their needs are. I've just been involved with, on-site project management. So anything from pre-planning to project closeout is pretty much what my forte is.
So it's definitely true that in construction projects, planning is important, right? Project management is important. There are deadlines that are associated with some very real costs when you're building anything. You guys don't know this about me, but that's the world I came from too. I worked in construction, modular home construction specifically, for about 10 years. And so I was a part of that side of everything from a single family home to 5-story apartment buildings. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces and a lot of stakeholders to keep straight. And whether you're building an actual building or you're building insert whatever thing, like we build things in marketing, right? There's still that need for project management and aligning all these different parts and people. Not everybody believes in that though. So I'm just curious your experience with that, right? Like, how do you convert a non-believer to understand, like, you got to take a minute before you just dive in and start doing stuff to put the plan in place?
Yeah. And we've dealt with clients who, they draw a cartoon on a whiteboard and say, this is how we're going to manage and execute the project. And they don't even need an eraser. It's just the way it's going to work. And then we try to help them understand the risks associated with not working through all the details and understanding what's at risk, and B, being flexible enough to recognize change and forecast change going forward. The advantage today, as opposed to 30 years ago, is the tool sets that are available for construction management allow that analysis, digesting of information and making a decision moving forward so much faster. Beyond just the construction project, we spend a fair amount of time with clients in managing what we call our portfolio. So as they're taking a host of projects from an inception or an idea through initial development and permitting, they might have a queue of 30 projects on their list, of which out of that 30, 3 or 4 only get to construction, but they have to manage both the execution and the development of all those projects on their own timelines and forecast the management, what the resources necessary to execute those and the costs are, so the decisions are made which projects go forward and which ones fall off the wayside.
So can you give us some examples, maybe some specifics would be good to paint the picture of the, like, what can go wrong, right? Like, you talk about, you said the word risks. Like, what are the risks if you don't have that plan in place?
So
Where does
recognizing, as an example, let's take an executable, a renewable resources project, whether it's wind or solar or something along those manners. Early on in the development phase, they look at a variety of things, siting, where we're going to site the project at, what's the local environment, what's the labor force that's available there, what's the sensitivities to environmental impacts, are there rivers or streams or bird sanctuaries or whatever, and then what kind of permitting that has to go through the local level, the county level, the state level, and the federal government level to be able to execute one of these projects, and the timeframes associated with how long it takes to get all those permits in place. And then couple with that we call this NIMBYism. I can't even say it. NIMBYism, not in my backyard. So, the person who doesn't want the wind farm or the solar field close enough to them that it has an impact, and they team up with someone like the Sierra Club or somebody else to try to challenge or even subvert the opportunity to get a permit so you can execute. So any one of those things along the road can derail your project, but that you've already spent resources, time, and money on, and now all of a sudden you realize that getting that last permit or that set of permits is just not reachable.
What comes up for me is encountering pretty large scale projects that involve a lot of different stakeholders. How does Vox? What's your approach? How does Vox? What's your approach? Project management is a kind of catch-all term. When in some regards, business starts working with you. Business and starts, hey, we need your assistance. We need your, hey, we need your assistance. We need your help, your resources. How do you get started with a new? How do you get started with a new customer?
That's a good one. Well, then we would absolutely introduce the software that Dave actually and his partner Dave came up with. His partner and it's called Infinitrack, and it's called Infinitrack. And it's once we set up a site, it's the easiest way for us the main repository for every bit of correspondence between local people, anybody on the local people, anybody on the teams, our EPC, anybody involved with the project, anybody involved with the project, and it has access to it, and it's in an organized format where so that we can find it makes sense quickly, so that we can find things quickly, and then we can also answer anything that may arise. So we can always go back and look at notes from years past where it's at our fingertips.
That's a good point, Julia.
So
that's a good point, Julia. One of the advantages of Infinitrack is it's kind of a mantra that partner in founding this company and I share is that visibility leads to accountability. So we have this interactive space that we not only host all documents in, but all the project participants are members of. Task lists are formulated there, schedules are posted there, deadlines are posted there, and people are associated to wherever those requirements are. And because it's visible to the team, it becomes accountable. People take action and typically do what they got to do to make things get done.
Yeah, especially when you talk about local, state, and federal government and permits and different players. I'm sure things get very complicated quite quickly. So Infinitrack sounds like a winning strategy.
They can get very complicated very quickly, but whenever you have a formatted tool to use, it kind of lessens that whole burden on everybody involved.
Could you give us an example of how many different organizations versus how many different individuals are involved in some of these opportunities?
So let's just say we have a wind farm, and a recent wind farm that was done had 4 EPCs on it, because there was one that was the main constructor that built the wind turbines from the ground up, but then we also had someone that did the substation, someone that did the O&M building for operations and maintenance, and then we had another one that worked on the switchyard. So I mean, you're working with multiple EPCs, you have a turbine supplier that's also in the mix. So having an area when you can get all those people to jive and put the schedule together so that you can overlap, you can see where there's going to be issues, any impacts to the schedule, if the delivery is going to be delayed, how it impacts everybody else on that schedule too. So, I mean, the tools are out there and we definitely use them all the time. So they're key players. You could up at the corporate level down to the guys working in the field. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people involved.
And like you mentioned, Dave, it eliminates visibility.
Visibility leads to accountability.
Leads
right?
to accountability. When you have all of these hands in the cookie jar, I'm sure it's very easy for someone to say, well, that was the other subcontractor, or it was this subcontractor, the finger pointing game. So in a way,
Yes.
not only are you project managers, laying the ground, thinking ahead for your clients, but in another sense, you are the ones taking accountability and ownership over all of it and ensuring that people play ball. And, if the fist needs to be brought down, the fist gets brought down, so to speak.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yep.
there's always bumps in the road, but it's how you handle the bumps and how you get through them. And the quicker and easier way to get through them, the better off your project's going to be. When you're constantly butting heads because someone didn't get the information in a timely manner, that just creates, a toxic work environment. So getting everybody to work together is key.
These projects are really dynamic, and the designs associated with these projects will change from month to month sometimes, right? So making sure that the team members have access to the most current drawing or the most current specification that's out there. So we're putting things in the right place, and things are moving forward with the right momentum, I guess, is
Right.
what I'm looking for. So.
Thinking back to, sorry, not to dominate the conversation, Miles. My husband's an engineer. He's a mechanical engineer and a project manager, and we're currently here in Boston as he works on some projects that remind me a lot of what we're talking about today, although much more poorly organized. Dave, how did this business come to be? Like, thinking about the shoes and the problem you solve is so complex and requires such critical thinking and collaboration across people. I don't know that it's a problem many people would raise their hand and say, yes, I want to help solve that problem. Can you describe a little bit about your partner and yourself and what led to solving this problem of project management for others?
Absolutely. So it really rooted in, I was working as a director for a large independent power producer. And we embarked on a capital program to build 83 power plants. And in the beginning, it wasn't 83. In the beginning, it was 2, and then it was 12, and then it was 20. And then recognizing that we had our fingers spread in so many different areas, we had to decide up front, where were the greatest pieces of pain? What could we attach first? And then as you start to get that done, you just kind of build on it. So we worked together through that organization for about 6 years, and recognizing that what we were building, we could do that for multiple clients. Unfortunately for them, they went into a bankruptcy, and that's when we, jumped out on our own, started our business, and they were actually one of the first clients that came back to us to help them finish some projects that they had still on the books. But they gave us that leap forward to go out and start selling that as a resource to other organizations.
Yeah, and back to Miles's earlier question of what are the risks of not having project management. I mean, that's the greatest one right there, is if you don't manage your projects correctly, it's
Put you out
not
of business. Absolutely.
Yeah, way to put you out of business.
Yeah. So most of our clients are in an energy related field. So whether it's a gas fired generation plant, or it's a wind farm or a solar farm, every day they're not producing the electrons, they're not making any money. So when you can start putting it into parallel that what's a day worth, right? What's a week worth? What's a month worth? Let's roll up our sleeves and figure out how to carve some of this time out so we can get done sooner.
Yeah, that's such a great parallel to marketing. It might not seem like it at first, right? The energy sector to marketing, but when you think about the function marketing serves, if it's driving leads in an organization or selling a specific good, the cost of inaction, to your point, has real costs, right? People sometimes scoff at investing in project management to build the plan so they can execute the plan, but you need to take a step back and map it out. And then in order to make the money, right? It's like pay me now, pay me later type thinking, which makes a lot of sense because as a marketing agency too, like any time somebody's not working or any professional services firm, right? Like us, we literally sell our time. It's hours on a retainer. So that any hour that's lost because of some inefficiency that can't be billed to a client is actual money lost. Whereas
Sure.
these tools can help create the efficiency so that that doesn't happen. And I'm curious, I saw on your website you have offices in the US, but also in Hungary and Spain.
Yeah,
So I'm wondering if you see these principles the same in other countries, or if there are other things, like, is it different in Hungary or Spain just based on a cultural norm or something like that? Is it more widely accepted elsewhere, or just any global differences you see?
It does vary depending on where you're going. So in a lot of ways, a lot of countries in Europe are well ahead of us in embracing the tool, the management need, the decision trees, that kind of stuff. And maybe because they've been in business longer than we've been in business in the U.S. I don't know, but that's truly the case. When we go into South America and whether it's Argentina or Chile, they're a little more behind the curve, but they're willing to embrace it. Unlike here in the U.S., there's a lot of pushback because people think, well, we've always done it this other way. We've never really needed those tools. Why do we need them now? And a good example is we worked as a consulting arm to a large utility on the West Coast that was embracing a bunch of rollout of new renewable projects. And they were in what I call analysis paralysis. They'd get 16 or 20 people on a team, and then the team would meet and try to come to a conclusion before they make a decision, and decisions just weren't getting made. And it finally got to the point where, we were saying, all right, you've hired your consultants and you've hired your attorneys, throw the ball over to them, let them make the decision. And if it's a bad decision, well, then change out that consultant and get somebody else. But they were so entrenched into the management of that utility that they're all just afraid to make a decision that it might be, some kind of a career altering event. And so trying to get that away from an individual and get it into a decision tree that somebody could help say, here's the three options. We're going to go with A because of X, Y, and Z, and just move forward.
Thinking about your industry and the work you do, I wonder, early days of the pandemic, right, when it seemed like the sky was falling and businesses were frozen and projects got, frozen. Did that post-pandemic, has that invigorated businesses to understand why working with Vox is so critical? Because you can do everything right, and yet the unexpected can literally still happen. I wonder if you saw, like, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, have businesses been a little more eager for your services?
I'm not sure if I'd say eager. I'd say the focus kind of changed, and maybe Julia could opine on this, because where we used to spend a third of our time leaving the office, going out to a construction site to help with the construction team, no one wanted you to travel. No one wanted you to come out and invest their on-site team with who knows what you picked up on the airplane. So it kind of shifted that
Right.
management.
It became a lot more remote. So having a site for everybody to go to was definitely the way that we made it through, I would say. Yeah, because everybody, you had your area, we could have calls, we could do the Teams, we could do the Zooms, but to have that one main repository where everybody could get that information in real time was key. So remote work wasn't, the work wasn't that impacted aside from making the trips to go to the sites.
Biggest challenge, I think, at least in our environment with the projects that we associate with COVID, was the disruption in deliverables. So getting materials from wherever they were manufactured in the world on a ship, unloaded and either railed or trucked into a site became a major impasse to progress on a lot of projects. And so being able to map that out and let senior management see that firsthand and try to make decisions based on what's going on there. I think that was a real valuable tool for them.
Sure, especially for financial forecasting, right? How much is a day worth? You could literally map out what that delay is and then say, here's the capital you need to
Yep.
bridge this, right? And help them plan for it instead of being surprised by it.
So normally I would take that piece of equipment and I'd put it on a ship and I'd wait 30 days for it to make its way, or 60 days, depending on where it was coming from in the world. Now today I might say, well, I know it's going to cost me 3 or 4x what that cost is, but let's put it on an airplane and fly it over there and save, days or weeks of construction schedule, right? So now you have that decision point.
Yeah, that's interesting. All this talk has me thinking, of course we're talking about project management, but you're in such a niche space and you have a mix of the services you offer and then also a software that helps you facilitate those services. We're on a marketing podcast, so I kind of have to ask, how do you market this, right? Like there's so many complexities here. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but this isn't something you can properly communicate in a display ad or something online, right? So how do you simplify the complex and get your message out there so that you get customers?
So for us, luckily, most of these projects we get involved in are multi-tier, like Julia mentioned, right? So as an example, the one she said, this example she used where there were the 4 EPC contractors, which means now there's 4 different engineering firms, right? And there's a whole host of equipment vendors and material suppliers, and for us it's like serving Kool-Aid, right? Here's a little bit of Kool-Aid. Oh, I like that. Can I get some more? And it kind of spreads through those networks. So somebody at an engineering house is using our product, using our services on one project, saying, hey, we could use some of that over here. Let's see if we can get them. And that kind of self-propagates, our base. So honestly, we don't do a lot of advertising. We've done some major industry type magazines like NRG, Project Management Institute, those kinds of things. But really, we don't see a lot of return on those advertisings as we do from just introducing this to different people and word of mouth coming back to us. Yes, good point.
Sure.
Word of mouth is definitely our best marketing.
It's always great when the product sells itself as well.
You got that right.
We think the tool's built easy enough that there really isn't any pain in the learning how to use it. And once people get embraced it, I mean,
Right.
you can talk of that more than I can because you're in that
30 minutes of training and I can get anybody to use this. Literally, it's so intuitive. We keep it simple. We didn't make it difficult. It's very user friendly. So, and the easier you make something to use, the more people will use it. And the more they'll buy into it. And they'll say, oh, this was such a great thing to use. It was so easy to do these things, to get these documents and get them uploaded. Hey, why aren't we looking at this? So then the next one, and next company says, hey, we'd like to look into getting this for our company. So word of mouth does a lot for us. And even just working with different companies on a multitude of projects. I mean, we have state people that are using it, but not necessarily for project management, but as more of a data management. So there's many applications that would apply to Infinitrack and the software that Dave and his partner created. I mean, if there's a need for it, pretty much anywhere it can be applied to business.
Good point, because you don't really need a construction project to use our software. It has some tools built in it that help you manage a construction project, but I mean, I don't care if you're developing software or you're putting a sales program together, right? It's think of it as a whole series of tasks. Who's responsible for those tasks? How are you keeping track of those? And how are you measuring going forward? Are you getting done or are you not getting done?
Yeah, and ultimately creating that visibility leading to accountability, right? Getting it where everybody can see it and you understand who's responsible for what. And if it didn't happen, why? And how do we get it to happen so we can keep moving things forward and things aren't happening in the shadows, so to speak.
Yeah, how do you fix that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
nice thing is that you can trace it all the way back to who was originally given that task to do and where it slipped through what crack and who lost sight of it. So,
which gives you some learnings then for the next time you do it, right? Why did that happen? What can we learn from
always
that?
a lesson learned.
Which I think again is a benefit of it, right? If things aren't documented and you don't have that visibility, you can't improve on it. Like as soon as you write something down, in a way, it becomes outdated. But that can be good because now you can update it once it's outdated, right? If it's just in your head, you always feel like, oh, I know how to do that, but you're not challenged in that way.
Reminds me of that saying you like, Miles, where if you have no rules, everything is an exception.
Yep.
So if you document nothing and things go wrong, well, it's always an exception.
There you go.
Yep. Absolutely. Look at that. Alan's been listening to me. That's good. I'm glad to hear.
I know who signs my paychecks.
That's not me.
I know. I don't know if I paid that check.
That's funny. Well, we'll edit that out because we can't let that. I think that this pause to just say, I feel like we covered it, right? So I don't know if you had any questions, Alan, or Dave and Julie, if there's anything you want to touch on, you can tell us and we can create a question to get there. But if not, we can, once we edit that out, I'll come back in and we can wrap it up.
Okay. Just on closing on Infinitrack, the software tool, is I think some of the advantage of that particular application is there's no software required. So if you have a computer or an iPhone or not to pick a particular company, or a smartphone or a pad or whatever, as long as you can get to the internet, you can use our software. I've watched this one actually bounce across the job site in a pickup truck, sending transmittal information out to different parties as we're bouncing across the site off of a mobile phone. So it's a pretty intuitive, but pretty easy to use. And like I said, no software required. So it's really just opening it up to individuals. And a lot of organizations have their own software, they have their own IT environments, but they don't like to let outside collaborators into it. So we become that middleware. So it's a place that all parties can push their stuff and get information out of, and you can regulate who sees what and who gets what, but it's not letting anybody in those corporate firewalls to cause you that risk.
Yeah, it's huge from a security perspective, for sure.
And a data hygiene perspective, thinking about the ability to have it all stored in one place.
Pretty amazing when you can get that done and you have so many people involved in something and they all say, oh, I know, that's on that Infinitrack site. You're like, yep.
That's awesome.
Well, Julia, Dave, really appreciate your time today. It was a pleasure getting to know you and hear about your company and your approach to project management and marketing and all the things we covered today. So thank you for joining us here on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.